Friday night. Friday, it's Friday night. Feeling all right. Booty shaking all around. Pump that jam while I'm getting down. Oh, thank you, Rockfin. All right.
Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Friday, guys, and welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. Long time no see, right? It is Friday. I hope you're excited for the weekend. I know I am. I hear there's a very big rally that's happening tomorrow in DC. Hopefully, those of you that are in the area will be able to make it there. But first and foremost, I want to give shout outs to people in the chat, and then we'll dive into tonight's stories. Interesting things to discuss tonight. Shout out to Elizabeth Grace for becoming a Sabby member. Let's give it up for Elizabeth. Give her a big whoop, whoop. Shout out to Tyrone, says South Carolina on standby, B1. I don't know what that means, Tyrone. On standby for what? What's going on, Mastermind Hour, says Tyrone, educate me. What does B1 stand for? I know. Tyrone, let us know. What's up? Let us know. Greetings to Steven, says $54 twice burned 2016. People don't have heroes. Just keep your principles. I believe Steven's talking about Bernie Sanders there. Shout out to Miguel, says peace. What's going on? David, did you CNN Sabby Minister of Israel said the quiet part out loud? I have not seen it. If it's CNN, I probably have not seen that, but I can check that out. What's going on? Hannah G says that picture of joy. That picture is funny. What's going on? Whoever says, what's up, comrades? Shout out to Alex, says peace. Greetings, Eric, who's a Sabby member, says, hey, yo, to whoever. What's going on? Ashira says, this is going to be a fun night. I think so, too. I think so. Greetings, Terry says, hello, Sabby and chat, TGIF. For the younger people who don't know, like when I was growing up, there was this thing called TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. And there was like a whole list of sitcoms that would air on Friday nights. It was kind of fun. Like Family Matters was one of those shows. It was pretty cool. I don't think that exists anymore. I don't know. I don't have like network television. Like I have YouTube TV, but even with that, like they took some of the channels away actually. But I haven't watched sitcoms in years, so I don't even know if that's still a thing anymore. Shout out to Lawrence, who's a Sabby member, says 2 minutes. I made it. What's going on? Mark says, thank you, Sabby and RBN. You all are the voice of reason. And for many years, I wandered a media wasteland until you guys came around. Oh, thank you, Mark. That's really sweet. Shout out to Lorez, says, hey, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. Bernie, from disappointment to disgrace. Dems can't be seriously considering awkward laugh. No sense of history. And wherever she travels to replace Biden, hit the like. Shout out to V, says, good to catch this. Greetings. Jig Grinder? I'm sorry, I can't see your emojis. See, this StreamYard has to get better with that, with the emojis, because they put it there. But what's going on, Jig? Shout out to Brother Daniel says, hey, fam, hope your Friday is awesome. Shout out to Dr. Nick says, hi, everybody. What's going on? Jesse says, I bet Bernie doesn't run for re-election in 2024. He would have announced by now. Ooh, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. Good point there, Jesse. Shout out to Rick says, hey to whoever. What's going on? Thomas says, we're all getting our doobie-doobie-doo on. Shout out to Janice says, hi, everyone. What's going on? Nelson says, I hit the thumbs up button. Can you hit the thumbs up button, everyone? That's right, guys. Go ahead and hit that like button. That helps me out with the algorithm. Thank you so much. Shout out to Desert Mantis, who's giving shout outs to just about everybody. And what's going on? Notori says, hey, y'all. Hey, ya. There was a song by Outkast called Hey Ya. Actually, that was just Andre 3000. Outkast did this project back in the day where they decided to do like a split album. So it was like Andre and it was Big Boy, and Big Boy had his album and Andre had his, you know. When I first heard that song, I actually did not like it. It took me some time to like that song, if that makes sense. But I think it just was different. You know, it wasn't what I was used to from Outkast. Shout out to Randy says, good evening, comrades. Will you be live on Sunday, Sabby? It is my birthday. I will be live this Sunday. Thank you so much. And I didn't want to skip over anyone. Shout out to Myra Page says, also hello to whoever you are popular. And greetings, Ravina says, hi, who, Notori, Rick, and Nick. What's up? All right, guys, we have a lot to discuss tonight. And I already have Sunday stories lined up too, because so much has been happening. It seems like every day the news is just pouring like constantly, you know, so there's a lot to discuss. First and foremost, I want to give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate you guys holding down the fort. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. There's also Sabbies hanging around this piece. And there are also members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate all that jazz. All right, let's do the damn thing. So, you know, a lot has been happening recently. And tonight, like one of the focuses that I want you to really pay attention to is the narrative that is displayed by mainstream media. So we are going to focus heavily on that tonight. We're going to focus not just on the narrative, but who controls all of this and who is really making these decisions. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we talk about these stories tonight. Now, let me go ahead and share my thumbnail so we can get into this jazz. Get into the jazz. All right. Tonight, we are discussing Briahna Joy Gray asked Nina Turner a question I think you guys have been wanting to know. And there's other things that are revealed in this conversation as well in reference to left movements. So we're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss Wolf Blitzer and Joy Reid give in. Whoa. Everything is happening all at once, folks. MSNBC and CNN, they are losing control of the narrative. And we have you guys, all of you that have been out there protesting and voicing your opinion live on social media and all these different platforms. Shout out to TikTok for keeping it real. I believe we have all of you to thank for this. We're also going to discuss Bernie Sanders backs out. We're also going to take a look at something Bernie Sanders said a couple of years ago that a lot of people may not be aware of, that will explain to you why he is where he is today. And last but not least, we are going to discuss Joe Biden and Kamala Harris beg. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, they are begging. So I want to get started with this story about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So if you have not seen this information, you will see it here now first. So it appears that I said before, the protests, the massive protests that have been happening across the world are actually starting to push some of these politicians. Now, is it pushing them as far as we want them to go? Not all of them, not most of them, but it is actually having an effect on the narrative that these politicians are actually displaying on mainstream media. And one of those people includes Kamala Harris and, of course, Joe Biden. Now, I want to get started with two clips from Kamala Harris. The first one is from 60 Minutes. The next clip is from a different interview. I don't think they say where this one takes place. Oh, just an announcement from Kamala Harris. And I want you to know that before you see this clip, what you are about to hear Kamala Harris say in these clips, I truly believe that had it not been for the mass movements that are happening across the world in reference to Israel and Palestine, I truly believe you would not hear her making this statement. But this is not just because of the protests. This is also because of recent polls. And we'll get into that in just a second as well. Let's get started with this clip here.
Israel, without any question, has a right to defend itself. That being said, it is very important that there be no conflation between Hamas and the Palestinians. The Palestinians deserve equal measures of safety and security, self-determination and dignity. And we have been very clear that the rules of war must be adhered to and that there be humanitarian aid that flows. Israel, without any question, has a right to defend itself. That being said, it is very important that there be no conflation between Hamas and the Palestinians. The Palestinians deserve equal measures of safety and security, self-determination and dignity. And
we're going to pause there for just a second because who else just said that recently? That was Barack Obama. Barack Obama issued a statement in reference to this conflict with Israel and Palestine. I discussed that on this show. And one of the things that he said in that statement is that the Palestinian people have a right to self-determination and security. Now we hear Kamala Harris repeating the same talking point from Barack Obama. And this is something that I also want to point out, not just the protest that I think is really pushing some of these politicians to acknowledge that the Palestinian people do have this right to self-determination. But it's also the fact that Barack Obama, as I have mentioned on the show multiple times before, I truly believe that he is the one that is driving things in the background. Let's all remember, it took the statement from Barack Obama first, before Kamala has this rhetoric and before some other people have this rhetoric as well. And there have been speculations. We all know Joe Biden is not in the best mental state right now. We can see cognitive decline with Joe Biden. So there have been assumptions that Barack Obama may be behind the scenes helping with some of these decisions.
We have been very clear that the rules of war must be adhered to and that there be humanitarian aid that flows.
Okay. In the beginning, when this conflict started after October 7th, the main push that you heard from Democrat politicians was that there needs to be a way to get humanitarian aid into Gaza for the Palestinian people. And that was pretty much the most of what they would say, except for some of the members of the squad that have constantly supported the Palestinian struggle, like Rashida Tlaib, right? Now you notice the shift. Now you notice that they're starting to also say that the Palestinian people have a right to self-determination and security and safety. And they were not saying that before. Now, there is a statement from Kamala Harris that she put out, and make no mistake, folks, part of this statement, what you're going to hear from Kamala Harris, is because it had already been announced that Joe Biden or the Biden administration, that they are losing support from Muslim voters. Keep that in the back of your mind when you listen to this statement from Kamala Harris. Let the begging begin.
Our nation was founded on the fundamental principle that all people should have the freedom to live, to worship, and to be without fear of violence or persecution. Every person has the right to live safe from violence, hate, and bigotry. And for those reasons and so many more, President Joe Biden and I have a duty not only to keep the people of our nation safe, but to condemn unequivocally and forcefully all forms of hate. Since we took office, President Biden and I have fought to uphold that duty. Over the past decade, America has seen a rise in attacks on houses of worship. So in response, we expanded funding to protect houses of worship from violence. After a surge in hate during the pandemic, in particular anti-Asian hate, President Biden signed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act.
But I just want to add something here. What you'll notice is that they have yet to sign any type of act or legislation or pass any type of legislation when it comes to hatred towards Black people. And this is also one of the reasons why, you'll see this in a second, this is one of the reasons why Black voters are starting to turn away from the Democratic Party. We'll get into that.
To improve the reporting of hate crimes and to ensure hate crimes are investigated quickly and thoroughly. Earlier this year, in response to an historic rise in anti-Semitic attacks, we also released the first national strategy to counter anti-Semitism. And to make clear, taking on hate is a national priority. President Biden and I held the first White House summit to address hate-fueled violence, and we brought together religious leaders, community leaders, and survivors to continue our work to keep all Americans safe.
But not all Americans, just the ones that she just identified. So let's just keep that clear. Because after the George Floyd protests that were global protests, mind you, the response that we received from the Democratic Party was kente cloth and kneeling. That's what they couldn't even pass. And I pushed back against some of the language that was in the George Floyd anti-crime bill or whatever, the anti-lynching bill. I forget. It's two different bills. But anyway, I pushed back on some of that rhetoric because I said that George Floyd bill, if you actually look at the language, it actually gives the police more money. But the point that I'm making is that they didn't do anything when it came to preventing hatred towards Black people. They have yet to do this. So no, it's not all Americans, Kamala. It's just the ones that you just mentioned.
And today, we take another important step forward in our fight against hate. For years, Muslims in America and those perceived to be Muslim have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks. As a result of the Hamas terrorist attack in Israel and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, we have seen an uptick in anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab, anti-Semitic, and Islamophobic incidents across America, including the brutal attack of a Palestinian-American woman who was Muslim and the killing of her 6-year-old son.
I want to pause here for just a second. I think you guys remember when I covered the story about the 6-year-old little boy that was murdered by their landlord, the Muslim boy. That was a couple weeks ago. They're just now responding. They're just now issuing a statement about that. That was quite a ways back. Quite a ways back. So just keep that in mind.
A senseless act of violence that the Department of Justice is investigating as a hate crime. For so many people in our nation, the past few days and weeks have brought about all too familiar fears. Fears that they will be targeted, profiled, or attacked simply because of who they are, how they worship, or how they look. And so today, I am proud to announce the Biden-Harris administration will develop our nation's first national strategy to counter Islamophobia.
Let me pause. This is not about the attacks that have happened to people that are Muslim in this country. This is about the fact that Joe Biden is losing support from Muslim voters. So this has been talked about in multiple articles. Polls are not looking good for Joe Biden right now. So this is essentially Kamala Harris, and I'll show you Joe Biden's statement in just a second. This is essentially Kamala and Biden begging for Muslim voters to continue to support them in 2024. That's exactly what this is about. Because I got a question for you, Kamala. And although you weren't in that seat all this time, where was the national strategy to counter Islamophobia after September 11? Where was it? Then some people say, oh, we had a Republican in office during that time. It was George W. Bush. Yeah, Obama came in, though. We had a Democrat president for 8 years. Where was all this then? You see how they prioritize other groups ahead of others? You see how they prioritize groups ahead of others? That's what this is about, you guys. That's what this is about, so that they don't lose those voters. Now, in what states is that really important? One of the most important states where they should not lose that type of support is Michigan, because Michigan can swing. Michigan can go towards Donald Trump, or Michigan can go towards Joe Biden, or based on the new polls I saw today, Michigan can go towards RFK Jr. It's not guaranteed that Joe Biden is going to win Michigan again like he did in 2020. So they really cannot afford to lose those voters. That's what this is really about. I don't want you to watch this and think that Kamala cares. Kamala don't care. Kamala don't care. Kamala is just cashing checks, writing books, and sitting in the seat, or she's just walking. That's it. That's what Kamala's doing. She's just there for representation only. Let's continue.
This strategy will be a comprehensive and detailed plan to protect Muslims and those perceived to be Muslim from hate, bigotry, and violence, and to address the concern that some government policies may discriminate against Muslims. For example, the so-called Muslim ban, which President Biden revoked on our first day in office. So here's the bottom line. In America, no one should be made to fight hate alone. And in this moment, then, let us all clearly say, a harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us.
I officially co-sign this statement. Please come out and vote for us in 2024, Kamala Harris. Now, I want to show you the statement that Joe Biden gave in reference to this as well, because he retweeted this statement from Kamala Harris, and he said, "We can't stand by while hate against Muslims and those wrongfully perceived to be Muslim, including Arab and Sikhs, is given oxygen. That's why we're developing a national strategy to counter Islamophobia and related forms of hate. Silence is complicity. We won't be silent." Now, let me explain to you why Joe Biden is full of crap. If he really cared that much about the Muslim community, Joe Biden would not be sending weapons to Israel right now to continue to destroy Muslim communities in Gaza. And that is essentially what is happening. Making backdoor deals with Netanyahu. Oh, it's all over social media. Information that apparently was not supposed to get out. This is how you know they're full of it. And I think more people are starting to see past their game, which is great. That's great news for us. Now I want to show you these polls because I want you to see what this is really about. So this is from Dean Phillips. He's just recently announced that he's primary challenging Joe Biden. I also told you I think Dean is full of crap too. He goes on to say, in one graph, this is why I'm running for president. We could be sleepwalking towards a disaster. We need an open primary, and I hope other qualified Democrats still jump in. But Dean is making this about him, okay? Dean doesn't want the voices that are further to the left. He really doesn't like what they're doing. He doesn't like them siding with the Palestinian struggle. So just FYI. But this poll, however, is not full of crap. Right now, as it stands, Trump leads in 5 of the 7 swing states. Head-to-head results in battleground state poll. Let's look at the states. Biden is leading in Nevada by 3 points. Michigan is purple. It says plus 0 points. So that means he did not increase there. But he's also leading in Pennsylvania by 1 point. Donald Trump is leading in Wisconsin by 2 points. North Carolina by 4 points. Arizona by 4 points. Georgia by 5 points. Now, why is this problematic? Number one, some of these states, Joe Biden won. Joe Biden, if we remember correctly, in 2020, he won Pennsylvania. He won Arizona. He won Georgia. I want to say he won Wisconsin too. I believe he did win Wisconsin. Anyway, most of these swing states, Joe Biden won in 2020. Now Donald Trump is leading in the majority of the swing states. I tried to tell people that just because Joe Biden won these states in 2020, it wasn't guaranteed that he would get these states again in 2024. Now, it's still early. We still have to get to November 2024. But if you are the incumbent, you should not be losing in this many swing states that you won in the prior election. This is a direct result of Joe Biden's presidency and Joe Biden's policies and how he failed the American people economically in this country. And not just the economic policies, but also some of the fascist ones too that I've discussed before on the show. Telling federal workers that they're mandated, obviously, to get the jab in order to keep their job. That's a form of fascism to me. So we have to think about these things. This is actually embarrassing. Even Barack Obama, considering the fact that the economy was still in a mess when he took office in 2008, even Obama wasn't losing in all these swing states come 2012. So this is important. And there's another reason why this is important. Because Black voters are also turning against Democrats. They are turning against Joe Biden. I want to bring up this clip here from Case Study QB. This focuses on Democrats trying to reach out to Black voters, particularly in Wisconsin, which is also one of those swing states. And they're focusing on Milwaukee for this particular segment. This is a very, very telling sign for the Democratic Party. That's why you saw Kamala Harris make that video. And that's why you saw Joe Biden make that statement. Let's get into this. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip.
Devontae Johnson is a foot soldier for democracy in one of its most crucial battlegrounds.
Hello, I'm Devontae for Black Leaders Organizing for Community.
This stop is encouraging.
I'm so happy that it's a Black man out here that's going from door to door.
She's a tough one.
Fellow organizer Des Woods, though, gets the response far more common these days.
I don't want to talk about the election.
Woods is trained to keep trying.
So are you not a voter?
When I want to, and right now I don't want to.
You heard that? That's right. Say it again, Grandma. She said, when I want to, and right now I don't want to. This also reminds me of the poll that I conducted on this show with you guys last night, where 37% of you said you do not plan to vote. This is a very telling time.
Predominantly Black neighborhoods on Milwaukee's north side can look and feel forgotten.
One of the main things you care about.
The canvassers meet often and share what they are hearing. Good paying jobs are scarce. Rent is up. The streets used to be cleaner and safer.
Do y'all hear people say, ain't nothing happening, it won't affect us? It don't. Raise your hand. Raise your hand.
That's all they be saying. It's like, ain't no change.
Wow.
So we see all these other areas.
Block founder Angela Lang outlines this week's agenda and next November's stakes.
There's no way to win a statewide election that doesn't run through the Black community. What happens in Milwaukee can impact the rest of the state, which ultimately can impact the rest of the country. No pressure.
The president was last here in August for a green energy event, and this old industrial site is being cleaned up with Biden infrastructure money.
Putting in the work for Black America.
But early spending on radio and TV ads targeting black voters is proof the campaign sees the problem. Those ads don't mention one issue critical here.
People are wondering, what is he doing in terms of police accountability and criminal justice reform?
Lang also says the president better show up more.
People always want to see people actually paying attention, and sometimes that means being able to physically be here and engage.
Black turnout soared here in the Obama years, but it dropped in 2016 and was flat in 2020.
You hear that part? It was flat in 2020, dropped in 2016. Who ran for president in 2016? Hillary Clinton, right? So she was in the general election. So black voters in Milwaukee were not feeling Hillary Clinton. I wonder why. Right? So Milwaukee, one of the most segregated cities in the country, by the way, but the majority of the African-American population in Wisconsin is in Milwaukee. So in reference to the Democratic Party, what happens there can explain what will happen for the rest of the state for Wisconsin. We're talking about the cities that have the most people. So this is really important. This is very telling about how black voters are feeling about the Biden administration. Notice she brought up criminal justice. This is not going to go away. You know, you can't just put on kente cloth and kneel and think that, okay, black people are okay with us again now, when you are not actually giving anything to or doing anything to improve the lives of African Americans in this country. But we sit back and we see you doing it for everybody else. On
a scale of 1 to 10, how would you grade the Joe Biden presidency in terms of its impact on your life and your community?
A 4.
A 4.
Yeah, and I love Joe.
Yvette Baker, though, sees a reason for optimism.
The alternative is the man whose name I try not to say.
Well, I'll say it. When we say,
notice what she did. She said that Joe Biden, if a scale to 1 to 10, how has he improved her life? She said a 4. But then she said, but I love Joe. Why? See, this is the question that I would have asked if I was doing this interview. I would have asked her, why do you love Joe Biden? What is it about Joe Biden that you love so much, given the fact that you feel that he's not improving the material needs of not just your life, but people in your community? Why do you love him? This is the question we need to start asking voters. But why? Why do you? Because if they're not actually helping you and their policies in return are also harming you, maybe you don't actually like their policies or the party. Maybe you just like the fact that he's not the other guy. And should that be enough to make you go stand in line for hours again and vote for him?
as we sit here today, the likely alternative is Donald Trump.
Right.
Would that be enough to motivate people, even if maybe they're a little on Biden?
I think so.
Joanna Brooks is one such voter. She owns a yoga studio just across the Milwaukee line in Glendale.
All right, y'all.
Like many we met in the city, Brooks says black voters get taken for granted.
Black people in general, I think, tend to be pretty loyal to the Democratic Party. And sometimes I wonder, just based on how that party has performed thus far for people of color, if we should continue to be.
But Brooks says that accountability exercise must wait until after 2024 because
this is the problem.
Of constant Republican attacks on abortion rights and voting rights.
Let me pause there for just a second. This is the problem that we have within the Black community. Notice what she said. She said Black voters are loyal to the Democratic Party. Guys, let me ask you a question. Would you stay in a relationship with someone if you're loyal to them, but they are not loyal to you? Would you stay in a relationship with that person? Probably not, right? So why are we, those of us who are African American, why are we continuing to be loyal to a party that is not loyal to us in return? Why? Listen to what she says.
Grew up almost certain that my rights were guaranteed. right? I took it for granted. And now as I sit and watch the work of so many Black folks during the civil rights movement, so many women who fought for women's rights, when I see all of their work slowly being undone, that was a wake-up call for me, for sure. You have to fight.
Eric Jones is no Trump fan, but he thinks it's foolish to bet on Trump motivating Black turnout.
I get people saying they're not going to vote. That's my fear, that if they see those two and they're going to say, screw it, we're damned anyways.
We met Jones at the 5th anniversary of the Bronzeville Collective. Several local artists sell their goods here. It is a source of smiles and hope in a community often defined by poverty and a high incarceration rate.
When the factories and the manufacturing left, jobs left. When jobs leave and opportunities leave, then you have certain things that are domino effects, right?
Jones says the president should stop by and learn a lesson.
You bring opportunities, you bring jobs, you get votes, plain and simple.
For the president, it is the mood a year from now that matters most. But the mood today is bleak.
If you're Joe Biden and you want to be reelected, he'd have a problem today, right?
Yes, he will. He'll have a big problem.
Johnson's work could well help the president. But listen.
If it were just Biden and Trump, who would you vote for?
That's just a tough one.
A young man who says the country needs big change.
A lot of people are going to stay home. I've seen this before. I don't think that they're going to get that type of turnout that they got in 2020 over the Trump fear, because I think what's going to happen if we do have a larger turnout this time around, I think it's because people are going to show up to vote for these third parties. People are going to show up to vote for RFK, for Cornel West, whoever else, emerges as an independent candidate or a third party candidate. I would attribute it to that. But I don't think we're going to see a lot of people come out to support Joe Biden like last time. Notice the difference between the responses from the Black woman and the Black man. And this goes back to some of the poll numbers that we've seen before, too, that more Black men are more willing to say, nah, I'm not voting for the Democratic Party anymore. More Black men have left the Democratic Party and have moved to the Republican Party. I don't think that's the answer either. I don't think you should be a part of either one of these parties. But I think this goes back to the women's rights issue. Why is it that more Black women showed up to support Joe Biden in 2020? Why is that? That has to do, and not just Black women, but also the white suburban women in the Atlanta suburbs that came out heavily to support Joe Biden. Why was that? Was that just because they didn't want Trump, or was that also because of women's rights? So as long as you have the I'm trying to tell people, as long as you have the abortion issue, this is fundamentally, when we think about gender, this is fundamentally the wedge between the Democrat and the Republican Party. Now, some of the Democrats aren't pro-choice either. But if you're a woman and you're thinking about women's rights and you want to vote in the two-party system, you're more inclined to vote for the Democratic Party because you don't want those rights taken away. As long as they have something like this to be that wedge between both of those parties, this is how the Democratic Party is continuing to get votes. And I've said this before, if they really cared about women's rights, they would have codified Roe v. Wade into law many years ago. They could have done this decades ago. It could have happened under Bill Clinton. It could have happened under Barack Obama, which he promised to do and then took it back after he was elected. So the thing is, the Democratic Party used this as a card in their back pocket to continue to get support for the party, because they know they're not delivering anything for the people. So they're just basically trying to get you to vote for them out of fear. That's where we are.
Determined to boost Milwaukee's Black turnout, yet not sure who gets his vote.
John, where else beside Wisconsin will Black voters be crucial for President Biden?
Well, everywhere, Anderson, because they're such a big part of his coalition. But let me just give you.
That was a dumb question from Anderson Cooper. Where else besides Wisconsin? The Democratic Party cannot win without the African-American vote. I don't even know why Anderson Cooper asked that question, but take a look at this map.
5 states. There's Wisconsin, where we just were in Michigan. Here's Pennsylvania. Here's Georgia. Even out in Arizona. Why do I circle those 5 states? Let's go back in time. Donald Trump won them all in 2016. It's not just Black voters. Joe Biden did better in the suburbs. Joe Biden in 2020 did better with some white working class voters. But to keep these blue, part of it is turning out black voters. Look at the percentage. In Georgia, 32%, nearly a third of the eligible voters in Georgia are black. In Michigan, it's 13%, Pennsylvania, 10%, Wisconsin, 6%, and in Arizona, 5%. These are just 5 of the most critical states for him to get his electoral math again. And again, we've placed phone calls into some of these places. But when we were in Milwaukee and heard it on the streets, Anderson, it's not all about Biden, but people are just despondent. And when you hear older black women say, I might not vote, that better be a wake-up call to the president or he's in trouble.
Yeah.
And this is a time where African Americans in this country could leverage their vote. Ask for some concessions. I don't vote in the two-party system, but if you're going to vote in the two-party system, you better come with some concessions. This is the time that you could do that because Joe Biden's in so much trouble here. Come with some concessions. By the way, other groups do this. Other groups do this because friends of mine, like my Latino friends, they do this. My Jewish friends, they do this. My Asian friends, they do this. They ask for something for their vote. So if you're going to continue to do that, honestly, now's your best shot. From what I've seen, now is your best shot. And you'll see how badly Joe Biden and Kamala Harris actually want to win if they actually really want to win.
Don't stay there. I want to bring in CNN political commentator Van Jones, a former special advisor to President Obama. How concerned, Van, are you about enthusiasm levels for President Biden among black voters?
Here comes in the token milk dud. See, they always bring in Van Jones and like, let's hear what Van Jones has to say. He's our resident black guest host. He speaks for all black people across America. Let's bring him in.
There's no word big enough for the amount of concern because people are just hurt. It's remarkable. I think when you remember 2008, the hope, and 2016, the determination, 2016, people kind of took their foot off the gas with Hillary Clinton. I think that police reform, nothing. Criminal justice reform, nothing. Voting rights, nothing. Like the things that black people came out and voted for and voted about, George Floyd, the John Lewis civil rights, nothing has gotten done on the black card. And so it's starting to feel like, wow, like, you know, the economy isn't that good and our issues didn't get taken seriously. And what are we supposed to do? And I also think that people think that black people are going to be single issue voters. We don't like Donald Trump. I don't think that's smart. There might be some black single issue anti-Trump voters, but you also got people who are having problems filling up their gas tank and they've got other stuff that they're concerned about. So
Van Jones is not one of those people that has problems filling up his gas tank. Remember, he got that money from Jeff Bezos. So don't let him. He's not one of those people. But you know what's interesting when they bring up voting rights in 2023? Why are we still talking about voting rights in 2023? But two, do voting rights matter if you're being killed by the police? What's more pressing? Do voting rights matter for the black community if you can't get into your car and drive down the street without being pulled by the police just because of the color of your skin? Something to think about. I don't hear too many, by the way, having worked with a lot of young people, I don't hear too many black Gen Z kids talking about voting rights. I hear them talking about issues that are going to save their life.
Look, John King has put his finger on exactly what is happening across the board. You're hearing in every black church, every black community center, every barber shop, every nail salon, exactly what he found.
Van, I mean, to your point, there was the guy in John's story.
It's always interesting to me how they mention those places, the church, the barber shop, as if those are the only places that black people congregate in. This always just cracks me up. Oh, but the black church, they're saying this, they're saying it at the barber shop, as if we don't do other things. As if we don't go to the gym. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not at the barber shop. Oh, man.
Who said that it would be foolish for people to think that Trump will motivate voters, but black voters, to turn out for Biden.
Look, there will be some people just not liking Trump is enough, but there's other people who feel like, man, what do we have to do? We stand in these long lines for hours and hours and hours. We're getting gerrymandered. We have to fight so hard just to vote, and then the neighborhood's not any better, and then affirmative action gets taken away, and then the voting rights is worse, and the gerrymandering is worse, and nothing is happening. So I'm just saying this is a moment right now. After a campaign and people have gotten a chance to go out there and make the argument and really get close to making the comparison, it may change. It could shift. There's a fight to be had. But I just want people to know you're not starting from a 2008, 2012 Barack Obama high enthusiasm from black voters. You're starting from the opposite. If you don't know that, you're not going to appoint, you're not going to volunteer right, you're not going to donate right, and the Democrats are going to be caught sleeping at the wheel.
And John, you heard that from voters you talked to, that they'd hope for a voting rights bill or police reform or criminal justice reform, something.
Everything. The older black voters, women are often the glue in these black communities, Anderson.
Hold on to that. Who did he say was the glue? Women. Women are often the glue in these black voting communities. So, there was a saying, I guess some people still say this today, but you ever heard that term, happy wife, happy life? You guys ever heard that? Some of you married, you probably know about this, right? Happy wife, happy life. This is very telling, because what they're saying to you is that if the black female voters in those communities are not happy, the Democrats aren't winning. Better make some of the women happy, Joe Biden.
When you hear women say, people died for my right to vote, and then women had the right to vote, and I might not vote, I mean, it's stunning. And it actually it blows away the organizers who have done this in campaign after campaign after campaign. One of the reasons this block group is out there now every day is they understand how the challenge is. Van has done this for a living. They're knocking every week. They do neighborhood cleanups. They do everything to be in touch with these people because they know everyone's going to be knocking and calling and texting next November, and they want to be the familiar face. But I'm telling you, we knew it was bad from our phone calls before we went out there. It is beyond bleak. It's you heard the young black man, Devontae Johnson right there, not sure who he's going to vote for. Might vote for Trump. Voted third party last time. Older black women saying, I might not vote. For an older black woman to say that after all they've lived through, it just tells you everything about their despondency, their disappointment. They look around and they don't see.
I want you to think about what he just said. For older black women to tell you that after all they've been through, for them to say, I may not vote. He said, what does that tell you? It tells you that the Democratic Party hasn't done anything for the black community. That's what it tells you.
Change, and they also don't see the president. He better get out there.
I'm King Van Jones. Thank you.
Honestly, at this point, to me, it doesn't even matter if he gets out there at this point. I mean, if you're not producing anything, it doesn't matter. Professor Zinkas hits the nail right on the head. 2/3 of Americans want a ceasefire. Yet both Biden and Trump pledged their allegiance to a genocidal maniac named Benjamin Netanyahu. Neither deserves our vote. Democrats blew it. They're lockstep with the GOP in ignoring voters and supporting war and genocide. And this is that poll I showed actually on the show a couple of nights ago. Again, about the ceasefire. Should the U.S. call for a ceasefire? 66% of all voters agree, 80% of Democrats, 57% of independents, and even 56% of Republicans. Like I said before, Joe Biden is on the wrong side when it comes to this issue. But we'll have to wait till next year to see. We'll have to wait till next year. Let me go to some of the comments. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Black First B1, putting interests of black community first. Thank you, Roger. You guys know I'm bad with the abbreviations and the acronyms. I'm just thank you, Barack, for the super chat. Why is the U.S. funding both sides of the war? David said Biden was here, Sabby, in Minnesota, and there was a Jewish protester that I love. She was a rabbi and called him out. Thank you, Benny, for the super chat. Do you believe anything Obama or Harris say? It's all about the polls. Then they will go back to the original pro-Israel policy. Exactly. They're just trying to get Muslim voters to still come out and support them. Thank you for the super chat, Janice. Anti-Semitic, anti-Palestinian, and anti-Arab are synonymous. Arabic is a common Semitic language. We should consistently push back when they use rhetoric to fool people to think only Jewish is Semitic. Yes, guys, and you can look up the definition for this yourself. I think I tweeted this. Palestinians are Semites. We got to remember that. Thank you for this as well, Barack. A lot of Black people are voting for T Daddy now. Thank you for the super chat, Eric. Any plans to interview Phil Scott, the content creator, not the governor? The content, what? Oh, no, I don't have any plans to, not because I don't want to, but I have no contact info. I think someone asked me this before. Thank you for this one as well, Eric. As Black people collectively, we must do a better job at actually understanding power. That's right. Shout out to Donna Renee Smith for becoming a Sabby member. Give Donna a big whoop whoop in the house. Thank you for the super chat, Mary. Look how quick Cooper just pushes us aside with that comment. Disgusted. Thank you, M. Smith. Don't leverage your vote for promises. Yeah, like, honestly, for those of you who want to participate in this, then you really need to ask for these things, these concessions to happen prior to the vote, like M. Smith is saying. Shout out to Robert for the super sticker. Sebastian says, Sabby, I notice more and more Black people voting for Trump because of migrants in the economy. I've heard about that too, particularly in Chicago. I think I was actually tagged in a video that someone created about that earlier. And thank you for the super chat, Mary. Ha, ha, ha. Token milk dud. Man, Sabby. Ha, ha, ha. He does remind me of a milk dud. You know, little milk dud. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Van Jones, the milk dud. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. When you screw millennials in the Democrat presidential primary twice, when you tell I am going to deliver you 2,000 checks if you elect Warnock and Ossoff, when you force Jim Crow Genocide Joe on us, when you screw us on what we need for our community, when you only look out for Medicare recipients but refuse to extend it to all, you do all these things, understand that for every cause there is an effect. This is true. We're going to move on to our next story here. This one is about Wolf Blitzer and Joy Reid combined. So what's interesting about this story is I told you that I feel like you're noticing a shift in the narrative. When this attack happened on October 7th, notice that they were referring to the Palestinian people as Hamas as if it's all one thing, which was not true. You notice how they were mainly talking about the state of Israel and protecting them and their right to defend theirself. And they were completely leaving out what's happening to the Palestinian people and the history of what the Palestinian people have gone through over the past 75 years, them living in an open air prison, the resource being controlled by the state of Israel, and the fact that the UN has declared this to be a humanitarian crisis, moreover, multiple times before October 7th. And then you have the numbers of people out in the street protesting across the world. Well, it sort of pushed the hand of mainstream media to where, because it was so many people and because it got so much attention, particularly on social media and independent media, mainstream media had no choice but to finally address the other side of the issue, which I do not believe they wanted to discuss. So first, we're going to show Wolf Blitzer. Wolf Blitzer actually interviewed an IDF spokesman about an Israeli airstrike. This was the one that hit the refugee camp that we mentioned the other day. And you just have to see this for yourself, because Wolf Blitzer is actually going to push back on the spokesman, because I mean, at this point, like, you can't keep defending this. You know, these are not the days of the Iraq war where a lot of Americans are duped and just believe we're doing the right thing. These are not the days of going into Afghanistan where, again, a lot of Americans are duped and believe we're doing the right thing. Things are very different now. There's a lot of social media. There's more independent journalists in these spots showing us what's really happening. And so Wolf Blitzer pushes back on the IDF spokesperson here in this interview. Listen to this.
Yes, now is Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht. He's the international spokesperson for the Israel Defense Forces. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to ask you first about this massive blast that we all just saw. We saw the video at the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza. Is there anything more you could first of all tell us about how this explosion happened?
Hi, Wolf. Thanks for having me. So we'll be coming out in the next, hopefully, hour with more data, but I can update you now that there was a very senior Hamas commander in that area. Sadly, he was hiding, again, as they do, behind within civilians. And that's all I can say at this point. We're looking into it, and we'll be coming out with more data as we learn what happened there.
Let me pause there for a second. How do we know that that's true? Because I'm going to show you something else that happened today, which mainstream media had to actually come out and say what the IDF said was false. We're going to get to that clip as well. How do we know that's true? We're supposed to take his word for it? As if he's going to say, oh, yeah, you know, we just wanted to go after them, like whatever. We're just supposed to take his word for it. Just keep that in mind. Now listen to this.
So can you confirm it was an Israeli attack that destroyed a big chunk of that Jabalia refugee camp?
Yes, I can. We were focused again on a target, a senior commander, Wolf, and we'll be updating you with more data as the hour moves ahead.
But even if that Hamas commander was there amidst all those Palestinian refugees who are in that Jabalia refugee camp, Israel still went ahead and dropped a bomb there, attempting to kill this Hamas commander, knowing that a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children, presumably would be killed. Is that what I'm hearing?
So you see what's happening here? You see what's happening? The look on Wolf Blitzer, by the way, usually is not one to have much facial expression, but look at the expression on his face. Like, what the fuck? What? Now look at where Wolf is. See, this is also part of the problem. Anderson Cooper was doing this as well. Wolf Blitzer right now is in Tel Aviv. He's not in Gaza. Anderson Cooper is not going into Gaza. He was also in Tel Aviv. So you see the propaganda, and we're going to get into more about this when we talk about Noam Chomsky's propaganda points in reference to media. You see the propaganda that's happening, people? Who are the media people that are actually going into Gaza? Al Jazeera and other independent news outlets. Those are the people actually going into Gaza. CNN, MSNBC, these people are just hanging out in Tel Aviv. You see this? All right, let's go on.
That's not what you're hearing, Wolf. We're focused on this commander, again, who you'll get more data who this man was. Killed many, many Israelis. We're doing everything we can. It's a very complicated battle space. There could be infrastructure there. There could be tunnels there. We're still looking into it, and we'll give you more data as the hour moves ahead.
How does blowing up a structure or a camp which is above ground destroy the tunnels that are underground? You know, it's just, I'm not in the military. Never been to war. But I do understand infrastructure. Okay. It's just, somebody explain this to me. Somebody explain this to me.
But you know that there are a lot of refugees, a lot of innocent civilians, men, women, and children in that refugee camp as well, right?
This is the tragedy of war, Wolf. I mean, as you know, we've been saying for days, move south. Civilians that are not involved with Hamas, please move south.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a little bit more information. You knew there were civilians there. You knew there were refugees, all sorts of refugees, but you decided to still drop a bomb on that refugee camp, attempting to kill the Hamas commander. By the way, was he killed?
So you see what he's doing? Do you see what? Look at the look on Wolf's face. He's just like, wait a minute now. Let me get this straight. You knew that there were all those innocent civilians there, and you chose to do this anyway?
I can't confirm yet. There'll be more updated. Yes, we know that he was killed. About the civilians there, we're doing everything we can to minimize. I'll say it again. Sadly.
So it was worth it for them to kill all those people for one person. And again, how do we know that this guy was killed? How do we know? Again, we're supposed to take his word for it.
They are hiding themselves within civilian population. And again, we are doing this stage by stage, and we're going to go after every one of these terrorists who was involved in that heinous attack on the 7th of October. Wolf.
So let me just say this here for just a second. First, they told you they were in the tunnels. So if they're in the tunnels, why aren't you in the tunnel? Right, Percy. How do we know he was there? We don't. We have no confirmation of that. You see the problem, people? Some of you, I don't know, but I'm old enough to remember when mainstream media and our government lied to us and told us that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. So I'm skeptical to trust anything when it comes to war in mainstream media. Now, that was Wolf Blitzer. Now we get to Joy Reid. Stop Cop City shared this on Twitter. When MSNBC is airing this, you know Israel has lost the propaganda war. Listen to this.
And given these bombings are being done using our tax dollars, perhaps we should ask some questions. For example, how does bombing a densely populated land strip filled 50% with children constitute self-defense?
I never thought I would say this, ladies and gentlemen, but that's a good question. I never thought I would say this in reference to Joy Reid, because usually she just totes the State Department narrative. But you see what's happening?
How does bombing hospitals, churches, mosques, and UN schools constitute self-defense? Well, you say if Hamas fighters are hiding in the hospital using the civilians as human shields, okay, let's say they are. Are you arguing that flattening the hospital and killing newborns in their incubators and their moms in the NICU, cancer patients, someone with a broken leg, the doctors, nurses, and just the women and kids hiding in the hospital, that's not a war crime? Because you would be wrong, according to international law. And given
You know, this is one of those things that I think can also have an effect on mothers. The mothers seeing the children, that can have a big effect. I still remember when, you know, the kids are still in cages, but when it was under Trump's presidency, I remember like moms being like, oh my gosh, those poor kids. Funny, some of those moms now just pretend like kids are no longer in cages at the border, but whatever. But do you see what's happening? Again, I really do believe that this is because of the mass movements on the outside. And this is really where it needs to come from. Now, I want to show you another clip. This one is also from CNN when they actually had to correct something. Now, apparently earlier today, pull this up here. Israel admitted targeting ambulances, but claimed Hamas were inside. The Red Cross has rejected this claim. So listen to this. So CNN had to come back and say this. See, I'm telling you, it's all coming out now.
That the convoy was leaving the hospital towards the Rafah crossing. And perhaps most damningly, we've just been hearing, Jessica, from the Red Cross, who confirmed that they had been given information about this particular convoy that was due to leave the Shifa hospital on its way to the Rafah crossing. What we know about the attack is that there are several casualties, many wounded as well, and that this does appear now to have been a convoy of wounded Palestinians being taken to the Rafah crossing that was that was hit as part of that IDF strike now claimed.
Let's go back because she talks kind of fast. Let's go back. I want you to understand what she's really saying here. Just go back just a little bit. So it says Israel admits airstrike on ambulance outside the hospital. Now, Israel claimed that Hamas was hiding in that ambulance. The Red Cross is saying that is not true. Listen.
Jessica from the Red Cross, who confirmed that they had been given information about this particular convoy that was due to leave the Shifa hospital on its way to the Rafah crossing. What we know about the attack is that there are several casualties, many wounded as well, and that this does appear now to have been a convoy of wounded Palestinians being taken to the Rafah crossing that was hit as part of that IDF strike, now claimed.
It was a convoy of wounded Palestinians in that ambulance. Wounded Palestinians in that ambulance, not Hamas.
That was hit as part of that IDF strike, now claimed by the IDF again, with the idea that this was part of their operation to take on Hamas. The evidence that we're getting from those sources, not just inside the Al-Shifa hospital, but again, from the Red Cross, does seem to contradict that.
So what is Joe Biden going to do about that? Because that's a war crime. See, again, they have to report it now because this information is coming out from so many other places. Now, for those who push back and say you should not participate in the struggle, you should not fight for what's happening, for the Palestinian people. For me, this is not about religion. It's not. And for this gentleman, it's not about religion either. It's about being a human being. I don't have to be Palestinian. I don't have to be Muslim. I don't have to live there to see that what is happening is wrong. And those of us at RBN, we've been talking about this ever since we started streaming, to be honest with you. We've been talking about the Israel-Palestine issue. And over the past couple of years, we were repeatedly told that this is not an important issue. And now we see differently. I want you to listen to what this gentleman said here, because he's going to explain to you why it does not matter if you're Palestinian or if you're Muslim or not. Listen to this.
Palestinian asking people why they support Palestine.
Because I'm a human being. Do you think I'm going to sit back, watch my TV and watch a genocide? No chance. This isn't about religion, so it's not about being Muslim, being Jewish, whatever. I'm a Christian, right? But I'm a human being. That's all that matters to me. I know people keep saying open air prison, but I watched something today that was about the language that you use, right?
Yeah.
Actually, they're hostages. So everyone's talking about hostages.
Yeah.
Come on.
2 million people, hostages.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. And this will never, ever, ever end until they're free. Yeah. It's as simple as that.
Palestinian asking people.
You guys see that? That's what this is about. It's not about that. You don't have to be, again, I want to explain the difference between solidarity and unity. Unity is coming together. Solidarity is when you put someone else's needs before your own. So I ain't got to be the same as you. It just is what it is. I don't have to be the same as you to fight for you. That's what that's about. We have to go back to the civil rights movement. We have to remember it wasn't just Black people out there fighting for civil rights. There were also white comrades that joined along with them to fight for those rights. Putting someone else's needs ahead of your own. Now, Rome said something. Rome is my comrade from RBN. I want you to hear what Rome said. He said, I don't have to like you to stand up for you. Listen to this.
It's a shame how some of you people work. When we are standing up for a group of oppressed people, why is it you come to us and say, oh, you're Black. They don't like Black people. Why are you speaking up for them? You are an atheist. They don't like atheists. Why are you speaking up for them? You are this. They are that. Why are you speaking up for them? They don't like you. Why are you speaking up for them? solidarity isn't a popularity contest. I don't give a damn if the shit is happening to Jim, Sally, Tyrone, Muhammad. If it's wrong, I'm gonna speak up. And if it can happen to them, it can happen to me easily. What makes us so different besides our skin color or religion or lack of? We all are humans. We all are on this earth together, and we all live under the fucking iron fist of the empire. And just because the nigga don't like me, don't mean I'm not gonna stand up for what's right. Solidarity isn't a popularity contest. Ain't nobody gotta like your ass. Ain't nobody gotta move and step with you every fucking walk of the way. But when we speak up, when it's time to speak up, that's when it's time to speak up. Because right is right and wrong is wrong. Straight the fuck up. Fuck who likes you. We know who hates you. We know who hates you. And they hate us all. And if we don't stand up against these motherfuckers, who will?
So that's something I want you to take home with you. That's Rome, one of my comrades from RBN. I want you to take that home with you, what he said there about solidarity is not a popularity contest. And sometimes I think some of the people who actually preach that rhetoric to us, they're just trying to stop us from trying to fight for other people. You know, it's like, let me find a way to break up this movement. Let me come in here and say, you know, you really don't need to be fighting for those people because I knew someone who was Palestinian and they said this about Black people. Really? That whole one person that you know represents the entire Palestinian community? It's things like that. So we have to be very careful about the message that is put into our ears from naysayers who don't want to be involved with that fight. And I totally get it. There's always going to be critiques here and there. But some people will go to extremes to make sure that you do not stand in solidarity with other people. And those are the people that you need to be very cautious of and you need to give a side eye to, because you need to ask yourself, what's their agenda? What are you fighting for? Start asking people this. When people come to you and they criticize you for attending protests or trying to have solidarity with people, just turn to them and say, what are you doing? What are you fighting for? Who are you helping in your community? What you been working on lately? Most of the time, nothing. Think about that. Now, the media narrative is starting to shift because it has to, because of the mass movements on the ground. But this also is related to the media and mass manipulation. So we're going to learn a little bit here tonight. We're going to dive in a little bit into Noam Chomsky's propaganda in reference to the media. There are 5 stages of this that we are going to focus on, because I want you to understand how mainstream media is able to control the narrative and basically brainwash a lot of people. Let's dive into this clip here. Noam Chomsky's media and mass manipulation. Listen to this.
Scientifically informed, guided mass manipulation by experts and specialists working for the government and for corporations. Chomsky's theory is basically a response to Lippmann and Bernays. And Chomsky's main points are the following. First, elite-guided mass media manipulation has been central to the functioning of capitalism in liberal democracies. But second, that's illiberal and non-democratic. Third, what is needed instead? A truly democratic, anarchic mass media within libertarian socialism. Domination-free mass media in an open public sphere. Fourth, Chomsky pointed to small, diverse, local community media, like radio stations or magazines, as examples of providing quality information and serving as a forum for public debate.
Let's pause here for just a second and look at number one. Elite guided mass media manipulation has been central to the functioning of capitalism in liberal democracies. Pay attention to elite guided mass media. So who controls the media? Who controls the information that we are actually receiving? And this point here that Chomsky has about small, diverse, local community media, this is what we've been trying to drive people towards, these smaller outlets, right? Like even myself, I'm still considered a small outlet, or some of the media's channels that you see on YouTube, for example, and independent media.
And then fifth, however, these media are suppressed, and instead mass media function as outlined by him in the propaganda model.
Pause. However, these media are suppressed. Instead, mass media function as outlined in the propaganda model. What do we talk about all the time on YouTube? We talk about how independent media is being suppressed by YouTube, that they changed their algorithm a couple of years ago to implement that suppression and make sure that people who actually have these verified network channels, so to speak, and mainstream media channels like CNN and MSNBC on YouTube are pushed to the top of that algorithm, and independent media is pushed further down to the bottom. So just pay attention to this. Now let's move on.
The propaganda model, which, as mentioned, is actually a manipulation model, focuses on 5 filters used to select information and brainwash people. The first filter is size, ownership, and profit orientation.
Pause. Size, ownership, and profit orientation. Okay, so if you look at a lot of mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, when we look at the size, these are large networks, right? Who owns these networks? You have companies like Disney that owns a lot of network television. I don't know if everyone knows this, but Disney even owns ESPN. So you have to pay attention to this. This is how one of the ways they control the narrative.
Media information is produced by large privately owned corporations, which constitute a sort of monopoly. They are in alliance with the political elites and marginalize small, individually or collectively owned anarchist nonprofit media and keep them from power. Second filter is advertising. The main sources of revenue of corporate mass media are not the receivers of information, but advertising. The media.
Advertising. So this is another thing, right? Certain companies, certain sponsors are not going to advertise on your network if you're talking about a narrative that does not actually support, what they're trying to do as a business model. If I tell you to leave the two-party system, obviously not many advertisers are going to want to flock my way. If we're talking about police brutality, often not many advertisers are going to want to flock my way. This is all very important. So advertising, that's an important piece.
Media companies primarily serve the interests of the advertisers, not the consumers. The third filter is sources. News reporting relies on corporate news agencies and official government information. This information is often generated by spin doctors. Journalists receive information secondhand or ready-made. There are few neutral sources of information. Investigative journalism is limited. The fourth filter is flak. Flak is a military metaphor, literally meaning anti-aircraft fire. Flak are actions by governments or corporations to prevent or dismiss bad press, for instance, through legal, political, or economic means, or through media campaigns.
That goes back to the Twitter files, of course, Julian Assange, of course, Edward Snowden. This is all connected. This goes back to the censorship, etc.
Prominent recipients of flak today are Julian Assange or Edward Snowden. The fifth filter is anti-communism, or fear. The first edition of the book was published shortly before the end of the Cold War in 1988. And anti-communism was still the leading ideology of reporting then. In more recent editions of the book, the anti-communism filter has been updated to fear, the spreading of negative images of dangerous enemies of the USA, like Saddam Hussein, Islam, or more recently, China and Russia.
You guys see this? So one way that they manipulate you is they have to make you afraid of something or someone. Maybe it's Russia who's the boogeyman. Maybe it's China. Maybe it's right now they're trying to, twist this a little bit and say we have to be concerned about, the Palestinian people and yada, yada. Like, they have to have that fear element so that you stay glued to that network so you'll see what is going to happen next. Why do you think during storms, there are some people who will sit down and they will actually just sit there and watch local news coverage of hurricane coming through or coming close to their town for hours? They'll just sit there and watch it because there is that fear. Oh God, what is this hurricane going to do? It's a category 5. Oh my gosh, what's happening on the coast? Yada, yada. People will just sit there and just watch it for hours. When the Boston Marathon bombing happened here in Boston, I caught myself being guilty of this. At the time when they were trying to find the Cernoff brothers, I remember watching local news, just hoping, did they find them? Did they find them? These guys lived around the corner and down the street from me in Cambridge, for people who don't know. So I remember just sitting there watching like, oh my God, these guys are on the run. We were all on lockdown. Nobody knew what was going on. So I remember just watching. And finally, my husband actually said, we need to turn this off. They're just saying the same thing over and over and over. And eventually by that time, that night, this news cycle started at 5 a.m. that morning when I was actually getting ready to go to work. Later on that night, they announced that the lockdown was over. They caught them and we were able to leave, free to leave our apartments, etc. But the point is, the more I watched, the more I was afraid. But the more I was afraid, the more I wanted to watch, because I wanted to watch hoping that they would catch them and we would be able to leave our apartments. So they have to find a way to make you afraid of something or someone. So fear is a great motivator, believe it or not.
Here's a summary of the propaganda model. A propaganda model traces the routes by which money and power are able to filter out the news fit to print, marginalize dissent, and allow the government and dominant private interests to get their messages across to the public. The 5 news filters are the essential ingredients of the propaganda model. Here are some further notes on these filters from a contemporary perspective. Back to the first filter, size, ownership, and profit orientation. In his analysis of elite media, Chomsky says,
now, the elite media are the sort of the agenda-setting media. That means the New York Times, the Washington Post, the major television channels, and so on. They set the general framework.
Pause. You hear the outlets that he just gave you, New York Times, Washington Post, CBS, etc. They set the general framework. And by the way, he's right to call them elite media. You can't even get a job at these outlets as a journalist now without having graduated from an elite academic institution. Didn't always used to be that way, but that changed over time. So just keep that in mind. They're the ones that drive the narrative. They're usually the first.
Local media more or less adapt to their structure. And they do this in all sorts of ways, by selection of topics, by distribution of concerns, by emphasis and framing of issues, by filtering of information.
Filtering of the information. This piece is very important. That's what I was trying to tell you guys. We think they're telling us everything. They're not telling us everything. They're not telling us everything. When I did internship, when I was in undergrad, same thing with us. When I did an internship at the local news station, it was the same situation. We would come back with all these different stories, but they would just pull this, and out. We'd interview people and they would pull out certain interviews and keep the ones that were going to give them the ratings, the ones that had like the village idiot. That's what they refer to it as. Like, what you see on the news is not the whole story, whether it's local news or whether it's CNN or Fox News. It's never the whole story. What you see are them put together as much content as they can in a tight package that can fit into a 30-second slot for local news and leave room and space for commercial airtime as well and advertisers. That's what you see. That's what you see. Now, to that point, in reference to a network like CNN, which is 24-hour news, they got all damn day. So what's their excuse? Nothing other than the fact that they're trying to feed you propaganda.
By bounding of debate within certain limits, they determine, they select, they shape, they control, they restrict in order to serve the interests of dominant elite groups in the society.
Dominant elite groups. This is what they're actually trying to serve. You see, they have to keep that advertiser revenue coming in. They got to keep that ad revenue coming in.
He's also, or even especially, critical of progressive agenda-setting elite media.
The emperor's lapdogs, like the New York Times.
In Chomsky's analysis, it makes perfect sense for the capitalist system that its mainstream media are somewhat woke, and that as a sort of left-wing neoliberalism or a fake left, they express a certain liberal bias.
In fact, if the system functions well, it ought to have a liberal bias, or at least appear to, because if it appears to have a liberal bias, that will serve to bound thought even more effectively. In other words, if the press is indeed adversarial and liberal and all these bad things, then how can I go beyond it? They're already so extreme in their opposition to power that to go beyond it would be to take off from the planet. So therefore, it must be that the presuppositions that are accepted in the liberal media are sacrosanct.
Mainstream fake left media like CNN or the New York Times suggest to viewers that Biden is okay, so that Sanders can be avoided. Or in the UK, like a BBC or Guardian, they suggest that a mainstream woke Labour Party is fine, and thereby they subvert a more radical, potentially dangerous leftism as represented by Jeremy Corbyn.
See how this works, guys? I'm not going to play the entire video, but this is very good. I think you should watch the rest of it when you have time. It's called Noam Chomsky, Media and Mass Manipulation. I'll actually put the link to it here in the chat for you to check out when you have time, just because I think it's longer than this. It's like 32, little bit over 32 minutes. But I think what they say here is very important. And if you watch this, or if you've read Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent, then you'll see how these things are able to play out. Then you'll see that. But in order for that narrative to change, there has to be mass movement in the streets. And that's how you can get some shift there. They're still not going to go all the way to your side, but it's harder for them to ignore it and not report on it when there are masses of people out there. So the protests are working. Let me go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Robert. Do you know of any pro-Palestine rallies or protests happening in Boston soon? So I've already gone to 2 in Boston within the past 2 weeks, but I don't know what else is coming up in Boston, but I do know the really big one is in DC. I think most people are trying to make it to that one Saturday, which is tomorrow. But if you follow some of those Twitter accounts, you'll be able to see that information as well. Also follow Answer Coalition, and you'll see some of those. Thank you for the super chat. Barack T. Daddy was the nickname for Donald Trump. Interesting. And I'm ready for that second part for the type V and C whenever you're ready, Eric. Thank you for the super chat. Banjo playing Bison. Please do an interview with libertarian Chase Oliver. I don't know who that is, but I can look him up. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. I tagged you in that Phil Scott Chi-Town migrant video. Yes, it was you that tagged me in that. Thank you for the super chat, Barack. T Daddy is the nickname for Donald Trump. Thank you. Oh, this came through twice for some reason. I don't know what happened. Thank you, Mary. These blunders by the Israeli army are hoping the U.S. would come in and take over command and run the fight. Thank you, Justin B. Beautifully said, Rome. Yeah, Rome hit the nail on the head, right? And thank you, Bryce. Edward Bernays is a person to look up about propaganda too. I heard about that. Thank you, Bryce. I'll take the comment on Rockfin as well. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Daniel. I think Kamala Harris is full of it. Israel is involved in a land grab in the West Bank while all eyes are on Gaza, settlers are going into Palestinian villages, threatening them, vandalizing their homes and property while demanding they leave their homes and villages under the cover of the Israeli army. Unfortunately, out of terror, the Palestinians are leaving their homes and villages. Yeah, and this has been going on for years. And thank you for the tip, Roger. Hamas hiding in the ambulance, really? Only thing worse than a lie is a sloppy lie. The State Department, with its MSM mouthpiece, is losing their war on information. Regarding the last segment, the only thing that worries me about them staying home is that less voting on ballot initiatives. That's true, too. Thank you. We're going into this story about Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders actually delivered a speech recently in reference to the situation in Gaza. I feel that it was short-sighted. I feel that ultimately, out of everything that he says in this speech, the one thing that he does not say is that he does not call for a ceasefire. Now more people are starting to call Bernie Sanders out because he's not calling for a ceasefire. So Bernie's not looking too good right now. I want to get started with this speech, and then we're going to venture into some other things here that's going on. Who is standing up? Who are the senators that are coming forward and are calling for a ceasefire? And you may be surprised at who they are.
The situation in Gaza today is a disaster. Congress must take action. The administration must take action. The world must take action. Today, 3 weeks after Hamas's barbaric attack against civilians in Israel, which began this war, many hundreds of thousands of innocent men, women, and children in Gaza are on the brink. Over the past 3 weeks, it is estimated that some 8,000 people in Gaza have been killed in bombings, including more than 3,000 children.
It's over 9,000 people now, you guys, just FYI.
And far more have been wounded. More than 1 million people in Gaza have been displaced from their homes, and some 670,000 are sheltering in UN installations where they are down to 1 liter of water per person per day. They lack sufficient food, water, medical supplies, or fuel. The hospitals and medical facilities there are in nightmarish conditions, with hundreds of babies in incubators and patients on life support at risk of death should the generators that sustain them run out of fuel. Corridors are lined with injured and displaced people, and overwhelmed doctors must turn patients away or operate without anesthesia or antibiotics. The humanitarian crisis is dire and getting worse by the minute. There must be a humanitarian pause now so that sufficient supplies, food, water, medicine, fuel, can reach the people of Gaza.
Let me tell you what he's actually saying here. He's not calling for a ceasefire. What he's saying is, let's pause all this for now so we can get the supplies into the people in Gaza. Then once we get the supplies in, they want to give Israel the green light to continue bombing the Palestinian people. That's the problem with everything that he's saying here. He's not calling for a ceasefire. And there's more. Just wait for it.
If not, thousands more will die needlessly. We cannot allow that to happen. A stop to the bombing is critical to save innocent lives and secure the safe return of hostages.
So, let me show you something. Here's the problem. So, you know, Bernie Sanders really fooled a lot of people when he was running for president. But Bernie Sanders is just like all the other politicians. Bernie Sanders is full of shit. Shout out to neoliberal tears for this. Watch this. Now, this was from the New Yorker. Bernie is annoyed that people are talking about a genocide instead of labor strikes. Genocide is so annoying, ... Look at this. Even Bernie Sanders, the most consistently pro-Palestinian senator, he also once lived in Israel, was not eager to take a vanguardist position on the issue. He finds the Israel situation depressing, and he's annoyed that people are talking about this instead of labor strikes. How dare people talk about and pay attention to genocide? How dare people talk about what's happening abroad? Talk about these labor strikes, goddammit, says Bernie Sanders. Stop talking about this conflict. You're pissing me off. Bernie doesn't think we should be discussing this. We should be talking about the labor strikes as if we can't talk about both. But which one is more pressing issue at this point in time? But this wasn't the first. We're going to go back a couple of years because I never saw this video or this article until today. And I'll be very clear with you. If I saw this video back in 2014, when this happened, I would have never, ever supported Bernie Sanders. And I damn sure wouldn't have donated any money to Bernie Sanders campaigns. But I'm going to show you this because I want to show you this is who Bernie Sanders always was on this particular issue. Look at this. This came from Andre. Andre shared Bernie Sanders justifies Israel's attacks on civilians in Gaza, claiming Palestinians launch missiles from populated areas. When the audience objects, he yells, "Shut up." This video is from 2014. Watch this. This is how he really felt about this issue. This was before he ran for president. Okay, people? Listen.
Excuse me, shut up! Hamas is sending missiles into Israel. Look at that. And you know where some of those missiles are coming from? They're coming from populated areas. That's a fact. Hamas has used money that came into Gaza for construction purposes, and God knows they need roads and all the things that they need, and used some of that money to build these very sophisticated tunnels into Israel for military purposes.
For survival purposes.
Okay, one second.
Yes,
no, I don't want to be interrupted. The question was asked. It's a fair question.
So that person in the audience said for survival purposes, just FYI. That's what they said in the audience.
The question was asked. It's a fair question. And I'm trying to...
Okay, you have the right to resist.
If you don't...
Yes, they did.
You know... Excuse me, shut up! Excuse me, shut up!
That's how Bernie Sanders felt about this issue, even going all the way back then. And if you don't trust the video, there was also an article written about this actual event. It was in the Washington Post. August 20th, 2014, answering question on Israel, Bernie Sanders tells town hall hecklers to shut up. You see this? He goes on to say here, at a town hall meeting in Cabot, Vermont over the weekend, Senator began to answer a question about the conflict by saying that Israel had overreacted, but that Hamas was firing missiles into Israel from populated areas, and later said the militant Palestinian Islamic group did not want Israel to exist. Several people in the audience began screaming over each other at Sanders. "Excuse me, shut up," Sanders yelled. "You don't have the microphone. You know, I don't want police officers here." Hold on to this statement right here. Don't want police officers here. Someone said, "What are you going to do? Arrest people?" "No, I'm not going to arrest people, but are you going to allow us to have a discussion?" He shot back. After some more yelling, Sanders raised his voice, "I'm trying to answer a question and I don't want to be disturbed." And even after that, there was more heckling and some profanity directed Sanders' way. Progressives have wanted Sanders to be more forceful in condemning Israel. Before Congress' August recess, the Senate passed a resolution unanimously reaffirming its support for Israel. Sanders did not object, but he also did not sign on as a co-sponsor. So this is what Bernie Sanders does. Look at this. Sanders did not object. So he didn't object the resolution for the Senate to reaffirm its support to Israel, but he also didn't sign on as a co-sponsor. This is what Bernie Sanders does. He been trying to walk in the middle too. I told you some other politicians do it. He pretends like he's so far to the left, but he be trying to walk in the middle too. There was actually a protest at Bernie Sanders' office this morning about this particular issue. How does Bernie Sanders allow other senators to call for a ceasefire before him? How does he even allow this to happen? So the protest in his office, this was shared by Jessica Burbank. She's one of the co-hosts of The Hills Rising. It says protesters with DSA Palestine at Senator Sanders' office.
They were both killed. This is Bassan. Bassan was passionate about getting Gazans cancer treatment. You know why? Because Israel requires a permit when you have cancer. When you're a 2-year-old and you have cancer, you need a permit to leave Gaza to get cancer treatment in Israel. And these two people that Israel killed were part of a community trying to make sure no Gazan child, no Gazan has to die because they don't have cancer treatment. This is who Israel is targeting. They were both killed.
Let me pause there. What she's saying there is true. We've talked about this before on the show, that yes, there are hospitals in Gaza, but the thing is, if you need to get like specialized treatment, if you need to get cancer treatment, for example, you need to go to the hospitals that are in Israel. Remember, what the resources they have in Gaza, they get the short end of the stick. They have what's left over. It's not like they have the best facilities. You wanted the better facilities, you have to go into Israel for that, but you have to get a passport approved for that. And it's not uncommon for Israel to not approve the passport for you to come in and get the surgery. Now, Bernie Sanders doesn't want to call for a ceasefire. He calls for a humanitarian pause. The fuck? Pause the firing for a bit, ladies and gentlemen. Pause the firing for a bit. Let us bring in the resources, the food, the water, and all that jazz, and then you can go back to what you were doing. However, Senator Dick Durbin, who I never heard of until today, apparently has called for a ceasefire. In fact, he was the first senator to do so. It says here, Senator Dick Durbin is officially the first U.S. senator to call for a ceasefire in Gaza, 26 days into a brutal airstrike campaign by the Israeli military, which killed over 9,000 Palestinians in Gaza, according to Palestinian health officials. So if you didn't know who he was, this is who this person is. Dick Durbin, we know who he is now, and you'll get a chance to hear from him as well from this interview on CNN.
I think a lot of people listening to people in power, President, you, Secretary Blinken, calling for a humanitarian pause, are asking themselves, why is that different from a ceasefire? 2 years ago, 2021, during an escalation of violence between Israel and Gaza, you called for a ceasefire and you said you, quote, couldn't disagree more with Netanyahu's policies, quote, when it came to the treatment of Palestinians. Is a ceasefire needed now?
I think it is, at least in the context of both sides agreeing. For example, the release of those who have been kidnapped should be part of this, immediate release. That should be the beginning of it. An effort should be made to engage in conversation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Let's face it, this has gone on for decades. Whatever the rationale from the beginning, it has now reached an intolerable level. We need to have a resolution in the Middle East that gives some promise for the future.
Have you noticed what you're hearing more now? Now you're hearing more politicians speak up and say this has been going on for decades, which they were not saying before. So see what's happening?
Told the president, the White House, you think it's time for a ceasefire? Because that is a word that the president is intentionally not using.
Well, believe me, what I said earlier about ceasefires under circumstances, for example, the release of those who have been kidnapped as part of it, indication that this is a good faith effort on the part of the other side. But no, I've not communicated with the White House on that.
Well, they heard you now. Senator Lindsey Graham.
And then it cuts off like right there. So you're not going to hear that part. I think that part cuts off.
On CNN this week. He is.
Yeah, it cuts off at that part. So yeah. Learn something new every day. Never heard of Dick, but he was the first senator to do so. But he's not alone. Connecticut folks, shout out to you if you're in the chat. Apparently, Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut. My new Gaza statement, it's time for Israel friends to recognize that the current approach is causing an unacceptable level of civilian harm and does not appear likely to achieve the goal of ending the threat from Hamas. I urge Israel to immediately reconsider its approach. And he has a statement here where he says, let me go up here. As I've said consistently, Israel has a right and obligation to defend its people from terror attacks like the horrific events on October 7th. The Hamas terrorists who planned and executed those attacks must be held accountable, and the ability of Hamas to carry out similar attacks in the future must be eliminated. To this, I always push back when they say that Israel has a right to defend itself, because they're telling you that the Palestinians don't have a right to defend theirself. That's what they're telling you. It's time for Israel and friends to recognize that the current operational approach is causing an unacceptable level of civilian harm and does not appear likely to achieve the goal of permanently ending the threat from Hamas. As we have learned from America's own counterterrorism campaigns, disproportionately large numbers of civilian casualties come with a moral cost, but also a strategic cost, as terrorist groups feed off of the grievances caused by civilian harm. I share Israel's desire to destroy the threat from Hamas, and I know Israel cares about the impact of this war on innocent Palestinians. I disagree with that. I disagree with that part of his statement. I don't think that they do. But even as they track Hamas hideouts inside and below mosques, apartment buildings, and schools. But the way in which the current campaign is being waged, most recently evidenced by the terribly high human cost of the strikes on the Jabalah refugee camp, we talked about that earlier, suggests that they have not struck the right balance between military necessity and proportionality. The current rate of civilian death inside Gaza is unacceptable and unsustainable. I urge Israel to immediately reconsider its approach and shift to a more deliberate and proportionate counterterrorism campaign strategically, is targeting Hamas and Islamic Jihad leaders and terrorist infrastructure, while more highly prioritizing the safety of civilians in accordance with the law of armed conflict. This does not mean Israel should stop fighting Hamas, but it must take concrete steps to end the current widespread harm to innocent people and children in Gaza. That's Chris Murphy for the Connecticut peeps. And then there's this message here from Ro Khanna. Now, Ro Khanna is not a senator. But these are all the people who came out before Bernie. Just listen to this. All the people who got in front of it before Bernie. So listen to what Ro Khanna said about this.
Ro Khanna is also on the Armed Services Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for jumping back on. I know you had to get away to vote, and you heard maybe a portion of the Secretary of State speaking before you had to go away. I wanted to get your reaction, though, to hearing from the Secretary of State a shift in tone, saying very clearly that the United States stands with Israel, but also saying that Israel we collectively need to do more to protect Palestinian civilians, and saying that there is a commitment to talks about a humanitarian pause. What does this look like for you?
Well, let me be very clear. The bombing of innocent civilians, women and children, needs to stop. It needs to stop today. And this is an emerging sentiment among Democrats in the House and the Senate, from Senator Chris Murphy all the way to progressive Democrats. Now, I believe Israel has a right to bring Hamas perpetrators to justice. I believe in their right to self-defense. But when we went after Osama bin Laden, we did not bomb Pakistani civilians. When India was attacked with a terrorist attack in Mumbai, they did not just bomb civilians. So we need to look at how surgically Hamas perpetrators can be brought to justice, but the bombing that is on CNN and on everyone's social media, that needs to end.
Did you hear what he just said there towards the end? The bombings that are on CNN, but also everyone's social media. I told you guys, it's everywhere, TikTok, Twitter, so everybody sees it. But I thought it was interesting that he brought up Osama bin Laden when Barack Obama, that was during Barack Obama's presidency, when they went after Barack Obama. This part is true. The US government wasn't just like, okay, let's just bomb all the innocent civilians until this guy comes out. They went directly after him. Now, that's not to excuse the US from other war crimes that the US government has done. But I think it shows you something when you look at Bernie Sanders. And I have to add this part here towards the end. And that is this. After everything that you have seen, not just tonight, but the other times that I've talked about Bernie's shiftiness since I've had this show, there's no way we can all sit here and believe that if Bernie Sanders actually would have won the presidency, which, let's be clear, the DNC wouldn't have allowed him to, but let's just say hypothetically, he actually won the presidency in 2020, Bernie Sanders would have never fought for most of those things on that list. Bernie Sanders wouldn't have fought for Medicare for all, because how are you going to fight for it? It's not going to pass in the House or the Senate. That was something he never answered. He never explained how he would get that to pass when there weren't the votes for it to pass. So we're supposed to believe that Bernie Sanders would actually push back on big pharma and big corporations when Bernie Sanders can't even sit up here in that whatever grander speech that he has, and he can't even say we need a ceasefire now. He has to skirt around the issue and say we need a humanitarian pause instead of just saying we need a ceasefire now. Do you honestly believe that Bernie, if he did win, that he would actually push back against powerful entities? Let me tell you, here's the big test. If you can't push back against AIPAC, Netanyahu, I don't believe you're going to push back against Big Pharma, Wall Street, and the military-industrial complex. That's my test for everybody going forward. You can use that test for politicians too if you want. But that would tell you something. Let's go to some of the comments and we'll get to the next story. Tia says, yeah, let's ignore the fact that this war has been going on for longer than most of us have been alive. Yes. Oz the Boomer says, shut the hell up, you lying con man. This is all your fault, Bernie. Shame on you. Yep. Thank you for the super chat, Jay. Dick Durbin is my senator. Well, hello there then, Jay. He only spoke in favor of a ceasefire after he voted in favor of the genocide. Make no mistake, he did it not because it's right, but just to save his ass. There you go. Thank you, Janice. Israel only has the right to defend itself within its own borders. It has no right to defend itself on land it illegally occupies. That isn't defense. That's a good point there as well, Janice. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric, and then we'll go to the last story. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. We need an amendment to the Constitution's federal and state that guarantees a right to financing for investigative reporting, full, robust financing. Doesn't matter if we're investigating your government, you still have to finance us. Interesting. And thank you for this tip, Hemp Carr. Ralph Nader, if you have not met with the Israeli peace movement, you should, I think, do so. That you can play a part in the historic effort to establish a broad and deep peace between the two Semitic peoples. The exchange should be videotaped and widely distributed to further the cause of peace and to witness Abraham Foxman dialoguing without his customary lines that evade the issues. Thank you for that, Hemp. We're moving on to our final story here. So if you have not seen this, it appears that, Briahna Joy Gray had an interview recently with Nina Turner. There were some things that were discussed in this interview that I do want to particularly highlight. I know some of you had some questions before about where is her new organization? We Are Somebody. Where is that going? Where is she going, politically, etc. But one of the things that they discussed to tie both of those things together is, what do you do now with what is left of the left movement? And is it possible for the political aspect, or let's say the electoral politics piece and the workers' rights piece to coalesce together? And how would that look? So I want to go ahead and get into that interview. But first and foremost, if you have not done so, smash that like button, guys. Thank you very much. And we'll go ahead and dive in right about here at 11:45.
Well said. I think one of the questions people are going to have about your new org, We Are Somebody, is how you plan to raise a lot of money. I mean, now this has been a concern among the left for a long time. The logic, at least before the kind of Bernie campaign to 2016 and 2020, was that unlike more centrist or right-leaning political efforts, the interests of the left don't align with the interest of most of the wealthy people in the country. We're trying to obviously raise taxes on the rich, do a wealth tax, expand the social safety net, etc. And that those are things that are against the interests of the people who tend to contribute millions of dollars to political campaigns. Now, Bernie's campaigns, especially 2020, in which he outraised every other person in the Democratic primary, despite their willingness to take corporate dollars and millionaire, billionaire-backed bucks, indicated that there obviously is a wellspring of small dollar donations that can add up in a really, really big way. But I want to hear from you, what you've seen so far or what you anticipate being able to accomplish in terms of the raw fundraising of this.
Yeah, we have to try. I mean, we're going to use every lever of fundraising that we can. We're going to do grassroots dollars. We're going to do more wealthy dollars, do grant money, and also institutional type donors. I can tell you from working, on the Sanders campaign, you and I did that together in 2020. I was with him in 2016 as well, is that there are some ultra wealthy people who know that the way the system is operating, it is untenable and ultimately is a threat to everybody. There are some conscious minded. I mean, some of those folks donated to Senator Sanders, obviously, even though the bulk of our money came from grassroots. And some of those people actually donated to me when I ran for Congress. In that first race, I was able to raise $7 million. Now, here's the key. There's a difference between raising money as a candidate and raising money for an organization, which is.
And let me pause right there, because this is the part that I want to get into. It is very difficult raising money as an organization. And I'm speaking from personal experience here. It is a lot easier for me to convince people to donate money to a candidate, which I have not done this year. I've not done that this election season, not since Bernie. But than it is for me to get people to donate to an organization that's actually helping people within the community, right? So we have the RBN chapters in different locations. I have the Boston RBN chapter here, and it's not as easy for me to get people to donate to like the RBN Boston chapter, which is directly going to benefit the people, than it is to get people to donate money to a political campaign, which at the end of the day, it's kind of, it really makes you think twice, because when you donate money to a political campaign, you are donating that money with the hope that that candidate is going to represent you and fight for the issues that they told you they would fight for. But you don't, that's not guaranteed. In fact, most of the time it's not going to happen, right? So you would think that people would be more inclined to donate to an organization that's actually going to help the people directly on the ground. To this point, this is why I did not understand why Nina Turner would start this organization, We Are Somebody, which is basically there to basically create like a strike fund to help out the workers, right? Why would you start that after Workers Strike Back launched in April earlier this year? Why didn't you just join forces with the worker organization that already existed, which was just announced, to do that exact same thing? Why didn't you join forces with Shama Sawant and Socialist Alternative to help with Workers Strike Back? And there's a reason why I asked that question. Because when I looked at We Are Somebody, if you go to the payment option, Act Blue appears. So why is this worker organization strike fund connected to Act Blue? Act Blue is connected to the Democratic Party. So to me, there's just this, the flaggies, the red flags go off. But then also to add to that, on the left, we do not have a lot of resources. The right has more resources. We cannot continue to stretch ourselves more thin. So now you have people on the left trying to decide if they're going to donate to Workers Strike Back or if they're going to donate to We Are Somebody. Why are we dividing resources? To her point, to Nina's point,
is a lot harder because the progressive base has been programmed, if you will. I'm not using programming in a bad way. The progressive movement itself started based on a presidential run, and it was a candidate. It was candidate based. And so I think the progressive movement is still very much driven by candidates. Another thing that We Are Somebody is going to do, I'm getting back out here and I'm going to state to state. I'm getting back on the road, treating this like a campaign, is to try to get the progressive base to understand that we may not be able to accomplish a whole lot electorally. We're seeing it now, that people say one thing while they're running and they do another thing when they get elected. But I want to put that in the parking lot. There are ways, though, for us to have immense success without having any elected officials engaged. And that is primarily through ballot initiatives and what we're seeing the House of Labor do. And the other beautiful thing.
Let me pause here. So this is really interesting. She's right about the ballot initiatives. Like, we've covered ballot initiatives on this show for quite some time. If you look at my homepage on my YouTube channel, I have an entire section just for ballot initiatives that actually were on the ballot for 2022. We'll do the same thing for 2024, right? So again, I don't understand what is happening on the left, because all I see are us continuing to divide resources. And a lot of this has to deal with personalities. This is what I see, because I'm just like this. I don't really have to like someone, but if I see they're doing something, you know, like for the community or people, and they say, hey, would you like to be a part of this? I'll go be a part of the event in the organization. Hell, I don't like all y'all motherfuckers. I'm sorry, but I don't. I don't like all of these people that I run into, but I'm not going to just be like, oh, I don't like you, so I'm not going to attend the event. I'm not that way. But the thing is that I feel like on the left, people let personality conflicts stop them from actually bringing everybody on the left together where we could have greater numbers, particularly when it comes to direct action, when it comes to mutual aid, when it comes to these outside, organizing. We could have greater numbers, but we don't, because the left is divided by personality conflicts. So that's why we always end up showing out in smaller numbers. That's why we have less resources. And that's why our turnouts are just not as good. That's why we're less effective. So to me, it's just, I just don't get it. I really don't. I don't, man.
About the House of Labor, and I'm saying it very broadly, both unionized and non-unionized workers, is that in their workspaces, some of them voted for Senator Sanders, some of them voted for Secretary Clinton, some of them voted for President Obama, some of them voted for President Trump, some of them don't vote at all. Some of them are Black, white, Hispanic, the rainbow mosaic. But what they have in common is that they are being oppressed by a similar force. And that oppression forces them together by way they put aside their political ideology. That, Bree Joy, I think, is the sweet spot to deal both with class and caste. It is not lost on me. So everybody needs to understand this,
But isn't that the same thing? See, this is the part, I feel like there's the personality conflicts that are at play here. What Nina Turner just said about bringing people together in reference to these labor struggles and putting your political ideology to the side. Isn't that the same thing that a lot of us have been saying for the past couple of years, but we were smeared as right wing? We were smeared as secret Trumpers. I was told I was a part of a red-brown alliance. You see, it's just like these kind of things to me. There is a level of elitism on the left. This is not just an issue in the Republican Party, Democratic Party. This is not just a political, ideology issue. There is a level of elitism. And it seems like to me, if an idea or strategy does not come from that TYT realm of the left interweb, it doesn't count. That's what it seems like to me. Just something that I've noticed. And look, I'm all for helping the workers, all for ballot initiatives, those kind of things. But the thing is like, I feel like what Nina has created here, I get the impression, especially with the Act Blue attachment, I get the impression that this is more about taking that energy on the outside and funneling it into the Democratic Party. If there wasn't an Act Blue attached to this, I would probably think differently. But I want to know, why is Act Blue a part of this?
I understand that you cannot fully deal with the class dynamic without dealing with caste. And when I mean caste, I mean race. And when I'm talking about race, I'm primarily talking about anti-Blackness, which is the foundation to all the other isms that we have to fight in this country. My job as leader of this organization is not just the strike fund, is not just to organize and amplify. It is also going to be to educate and try to build a broad-based coalition outside of a currently elected personality, and to show the progressive base that we can have wins in real time and change material conditions in real time, and let other groups work to get more people elected that hopefully will have the intestinal fortitude to do what it is they said they were going to do when they get elected.
This is the same thing that Kshama Sawant's workers' strike back already does. The exact same thing.
I mean, I definitely think it's the case that people, at least in my audience, let's say, and I think a significant section of the left, feel a lot more optimistic about labor activity than electoral opportunities.
I do too.
And therefore might be more willing to start to put their dollars behind labor efforts than electoral efforts. But I should also give voice to the fact that I do think that part of what has driven a sort of a spending freeze in terms of political donations from these small dollar donors was the experience of giving to the Bernie campaign and being told that it was something more than a campaign, that it was in fact a movement and not just a candidate, and feeling like those promises weren't really borne out. And I've heard that over the last couple of years as I've covered various congressional races and asked about people's interest in funding those races. And there was a lot of pessimism about the fact of being a low-wage earner and giving your hour, 2 hour, 3 hour salary in terms of a $7 or $27 donation to a cause that ultimately ended up not having legs. So I wonder how much you've heard from people about that, and whether or not you have any concerns about your ability to fundraise, given there's that sort of pessimistic sentiment out there.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm going against a tidal wave, and I understand that. But this is where something that James Baldwin once said is very instructive for this moment, when he said that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Yes, I could have sat back and said, oh my God, let me wait till I decide whether I'm going to run for another office again. Or I could say, here's a need, here's an opening. How can I use my leverage to show not just our movement, but just to show everyday Americans that things can change, and the power in a lot of cases is in our hands, and we don't have to sit back and wait for the right elected official or right group of elected officials who will have intestinal fortitude to get things done. So yes, Briahna, it is true. I hear it. I hear it all the time.
So I just want to say that part is true. You don't have to wait for elected officials to get out there to get things done. In fact, people that have been organizers have not been. That's the thing. See, this is the thing. When Bernie suspended his campaigns 2016, 2020, those of us that are organizers and activists, we had something to go back to. See, this is the thing. And I think, Bernie, he energized people to get people, into the streets, to push for a better life, to push for better wages, to push for better healthcare for people in this country. But like I said, after those campaigns ended, all of that energy that Bernie Sanders was able to garner, he did not take that energy and do anything else with it after the fact. And he had the numbers to do that. And that was on purpose. Like, this guy's old enough. You can't trick me. This guy's old enough. He knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't intend to do anything with that energy after the fact. So the thing is this, I agree with her when she says that you don't have to wait for these elected officials to get something done. That's right. But what I'm trying to figure out is, why are you then in turn trying to create something that is the same thing that Workers Strike Back is? Actually, Workers Strike Back might do a little bit more. That Workers Strike Back is, instead of just collaborating with what already exists and was announced this year, unless you are trying to take some of this energy and put it into the Democratic Party. Because that's what it seems like. That's really what it seems like. And I would ask her this question. LPA Film says Nina might not come on anyone associated with RBN show. She might be scared, LOL. I've interviewed a lot of people on the show, but if I did interview her, I have no contact info for her. But if I did interview her, I would ask her that question. And I don't think she should be afraid of that question. I would ask that question. Why you create the same organization that Shama Sawant already created this year? Why not collaborate your efforts instead of creating something totally brand new and dividing resources and dividing people? That would be my only question, probably.
I know that makes the endeavor of We Are Somebody a lot harder, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. I would rather say that I got out here and tried than to say I sat back because of fear and I didn't try when I see a need, and I still have both the national and international cachet necessary to do this. And that is why I'm getting back out on the road, because I want people to see me, be able to touch me, be able to hear me, and get them as amped up as I am able to do. I need them to believe again, not just believe in individuals who are elected, but to believe that we as individuals, whether you identify as progressive or not, if you are a working class person and you don't have a sugar daddy or sugar mama or sugar somebody, we are all in this together. Some of us are blessed to be at the top of the hierarchy of the working class. Some are in the middle or some at the bottom. But bet your bottom dollar, most of us work for a living, and we have to work for a living. And in that, there is some solidarity.
Senator Turner, you just alluded to, decision making around whether or not you might run for office again. When you were teasing We Are Somebody, a lot of people were wondering if you were in fact teasing a campaign announcement. How seriously are you thinking about running for office again? And do you think it would be, even hypothetically, do you think it would probably be still in the House of Representatives, or are you looking elsewhere?
So this is another thing. Nina starting this organization could be part of an effort to launch another political run for Nina Turner. So then it seems like to me, basically copying the socialist alternative model, which is what Kshama Sawant did. Organizing with people in the streets first, the Fight for 15, for Amazon, organizing with the community, and then the candidate coming from that organizing space. It could be that as well.
I'm looking elsewhere. I'm looking at a couple of places right now. I think, I did an excellent job. I was very good at it, and I enjoyed the work, even though it was very hard, because I am the type of person that I'm going to do what I think is right. And if other people don't agree, that's on them. But I got to be able, there's an ultimate power in my mind that I answer to at the end of the day. I may run again. I'm not all cards on the table. And yes, a lot of people, I got so many calls, so many text messages. And some people were delighted to see that the announcement was an organization, and others were really disappointed. And they let me know many people want me to run. There's not a day that goes by, or let me just say a week that goes by, where somebody is not saying to me they wish that I would run again. I was just recently in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee, there with some striking UAW workers too, in New York. Like everywhere I go, Rejoy, to this very day, people are asking me, am I going to run again? So I want them to hear here first on your show that all options are on the table for me. But I don't just want to get out there and just run for anything. I got to make sure it's not necessary. You run in the win. And I've sacrificed a lot, as you know, and many of your viewers have know 2 presidential campaigns, 2 back-to-back congressional runs. And we know that the forces came at me very hard. And I am often reminded that they came at me so hard because they know what I would do once elected to office. I'm gonna stand by my word.
I do.
So my whole thing is if she's planning to run through the Democratic Party again, I'm just like, what's the point? Why? Now, before we get to the point here about the money, because there's another piece here where they talk about the lobbies that went after Nina, like the PACs that went after her, which is still relevant today. This is the part that I was talking about, guys, and then I'll come back to that video. If you go to We Are Somebody, why does this, watch this. Paid for by Act Blue and not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. Paid for by Act Blue Civics. So I hear paid for by Act Blue, paid for by Act Blue Civics. Act Blue Civics contributions or gifts made to other organizations through Act Blue Civics are likewise not deductible. Why is this connected to Act Blue? That's my question. So if I go in and I want to donate, let's just say $10, credit card. See, one of the things that pop up says have an Act Blue Express account. Why? See, that's the thing that I question. Because if this is just about the workers and organizing those people, which I think that's great. Again, like I said, I think it would have been better if you collaborated your efforts with the organization that is already there. But I will also say, if this is connected to Act Blue, that right there gives me pause. Because that tells me that some way, shape, or form, I feel like this is going to be connected to the Democratic Party. So we'll go back into the part where they talk about the money situation in reference to PACs like AIPAC that did come after Nina's race.
I want to talk about that just a little bit if we could, because those of us who were following it understood that you were up significantly in the polls before AIPAC, DMFI put millions of dollars against you and for Shontel Brown in your race. And that has been a pattern across the country where AIPAC has specifically targeted left-leaning, specifically targeting Black and brown left-leaning candidates because of their support of the people of Palestine and ending Israel's occupation there. And in fact, it hasn't been limited to Black candidates. Notably, Andy Levin, a Jewish candidate who was, I understand, I think a synagogue leader, something like that.
Yes, he was
deeply involved in his own religious community, had his campaign ended after AIPAC aligned against him. I think Summer Lee was one of the few that were able to survive the AIPAC success rate. I think they have a 98% success rate in races that they enter. This is not a problem that's going away, and in fact may become more acute because of the ongoing crisis in Gaza since October 7th. So I wonder if you are looking ahead, not just for your own candidacy, but for the candidacy and of a number of progressive incumbents that are now being targeted by their fellow members of Congress, et cetera, because of taking a stand in defense of the people of Palestine's right to exist. How you reckon the left is going to start to get around that, if it can get around that?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. There's no doubt about it. I mean, as you laid it out, and my race became the template. When the leader of DMFI was interviewed, he made it very clear that I think they may have called it the Ohio 11 strategy. And Congresswoman Lee benefited from time, right? Her and her team were able to see what happened to me. And then also the forces supporting her, institutional forces, came out a lot stronger on her behalf. And I am so glad that happened for her. But as you just laid out, a lot of them, including herself, they're being targeted again. I see this in a multifaceted way. The progressive left is going to have to mature tactically and strategically. We have to admit that we are infants in this game. I mean, it blossomed. The genesis of the 20th century or 21st century, progressive movement came in 2016. Those are the facts. It is still an infant, this movement, compared to neoliberalism and other structures that have been around a lot longer than the progressive movement. So the movement itself, and I don't know the how, is going to have to mature tactically and strategically. Because
what movement, though? Like, I feel like Nina's still talking about the progressive movement as though it still exists the way it did during Bernie's campaigns. I don't see that. I don't know if you guys see that, but I don't see any movement on that front. The movements that I see happening are people out in the streets, are the people who are organizing, people organizing within their community, not that Bernie progressive wave movement. I don't know if we'll ever see anything like that again in reference to like a progressive movement in the Democratic Party because of Bernie Sanders, because of the letdown of him and what he has done, because of the disappointment with squad members. I don't think we'll ever see. I went to Bernie rallies and there were over 10,000 people. I don't think we'll ever see that again with another progressive running the Democratic Party. I mean, it's kind of just turned into a joke now. Like how you go from, you had a candidate that had tens of thousands of people showing up to rallies. Now you have like Cenk Uygur running for like how you go from that to that. So it's very clear to me. I feel like Nina's still talking about the progressive movement as though it's still like 2016 or 2020, and it's not. I'll let her finish up here.
As we fight not only forces that are against progressivism, we're also the neoliberals, but we're fighting multi-front wars God, I even hate to use the word war at this point, Bree Joyce. So let me back that up. We're fighting on multiple fronts. And it is very hard for a new movement to be able to do that without maturing and getting some sophistication on how we deal with it. On the bright side of this, we have shown through both candidacies of Senator Bernard Sanders and also in my first race that you alluded to, that special election in May of 2021, I was up 30 points and they walked me down. And one of the reasons why they were able to walk me down or walk us down, because I want to shout out all the people across this country who were right there with me, is because that vacancy, there was not an official vacancy because now Secretary of HUD, Marshall Fudge, had not been appointed. And so, but that made in lie that the governor of the state could not give a date. Had that race been in May of 2021, I would be Congresswoman Nina Turner. And they came at me because I am a humanitarian. I was threatened. I was called by prominent Jewish leaders who I had worked with in my city, told that I must disavow the squad, overlaid their disdain for the squad on me, even though I wasn't in Congress. You know, I served in the Ohio Senate, these very areas, part of Ohio 11th was my Senate district. And I got to tell you, Bri Joy, it was one of the most painful moments, you know, of my professional life, to have people who know me, who I serve, to tell me I must disavow some people for some things that they said that they didn't agree with. The only thing that
But the squad had no problem disavowing Nina. See, this is the thing. Nina was willing not to disavow squad members in order to help her campaign, but the squad members had no problem disavowing Nina Turner, with the exception of AOC, who endorsed her the night before at the last minute. This is why I say you just can't do this through the Democratic Party. This is exactly why.
Ever said, and I will continue to say, is that I believe in justice and security for Palestinians, and I believe in justice and security for Israelis. Period. That's all I ever said. And I was labeled, you know, as you know, I mean, you saw what happened to me, and it was very, very chilling. In that special election, 4,000 Republicans crossed over. I mean, it was so bad, people crossed over. I have emails that were shared with me by some of my Jewish allies of how organized locally some forces in the community were to come up against me to stop my candidacy, simply because I am a humanitarian and I care very much about the Ohio 11th district.
And we'll go ahead and stop it there. So one thing that I do want to say is this just goes to show you again, like I said before, how powerful some of these PACs like AIPAC can be, how they pour in the money last minute, how they flood the TVs with ads and things like that. That happened to Summer Lee as well, right? So you can't even say what Nina just said, which is similar to what Summer Lee said. You can't even say that and say you care about both groups of people. To them, that's still considered to be anti-Semitic. So they'll still, basically, they want you to put one group of people over the other group. And I think you guys can get what I'm getting at here. But the thing is that all that money came pouring in from those groups. Next thing you know, they were smearing her. They've done this to other candidates as well. And to her point, when she says all the Republicans crossed over and joined in that effort to prevent her from having this opportunity to win. Well, again, that just goes to show you, as I've said before, this is why you can't run in this two-party system. This is why you can't go into the Democratic Party. This is why you can't go into the Republican Party. The best thing you can do right now, if you're going to run electorally, is to either run as an independent or run as a third-party candidate. And for the people who have been telling me that independents don't ever have a chance, or they're not even polled, they're not even mentioned, apparently you see this time around that is not the case. Last night we covered the fact that RFK Jr. is in a three-way race with Joe Biden and Donald Trump. He is polling very well as an independent. Cornel West, he's polling double digits. Cornel West is polling at 8% in the poll I showed you last night. So we are seeing a shift. The American people are hungry for something else. More Americans want third party. More Americans want a workers' party, right? So these things can change. But I just think what I saw from that interview, even though I hear the criticism of the Democratic Party and criticisms of what was the progressive movement, it is very clear to me that I think Nina is still not ready to let go of the Democratic Party. And that in itself is a problem. I personally don't want to be a part of a party that doesn't want me to be there and has done all these things to you. We go to some of the comments here. Robert says, get Cynthia McKinney on your show. Oh, it's been a while since I had. Okay, so Cynthia McKinney usually does press days. So she'll have like one day where she'll go on multiple shows during that whole day because Cynthia McKinney's in Asia. But you just reminded me I should ping her again. Thank you for the super chat, Janice. Turner is a Dem with a not so great voting record when she held office. Using left rhetoric doesn't make you left. Actions talk, BS walks. LBA, oh yeah, I said that. Whoever said, I would argue that Worker Strike Back does more, is going to do more, and stands for way more. And a kid says Nina Turner is not to be trusted and she is trying to co-opt Worker Strike Back. That's the same feeling that I get. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric, and then we can skedoodle. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin hemp car. Palestine is still the issue by John Pilger. Occupation 101 was a movie we played on campus when I was in SDS. On the cover, they had this quote, "The only thing worse than ignorance is the illusion of knowledge." Stephen Hawking's. Also, Ken O'Keefe says he's willing to die for Palestine. He received the keys to Gaza. The cynic is the tyrant's best friend, as he says. And thank you for this tip, Roger. Bernie lost because he was weak. It takes strength to win, which meant if he would have won, that meant he would have had the strength to push for those policies. Even with trying to getting it passed in Congress, if he was strong, he could have used the bully pulpit to bully Congress into supporting his policies. Same way Trump bullied GOP by turning his base against them, telling them to show up. Oh, that's a good point. Telling them to show up at their office, call their office, get down with the get down, or face the wrath of my base. If that didn't work, he could have used Section 1881A of the Social Security Act to get it to them or grant federal waivers to states who wish to offer their own single payer plan. Nina, you said CBIs. Okay, well, East Palestine in your home state needs TRICARE for all. Run a CBI amendment to Ohio Constitution to get them and everyone in Ohio TRICARE for all, as well as Ohio Public Bank for infrastructure, and build the Ohio economy. Place Ohio minimum wage to stay permanently above local housing costs. Outlaw speculation starting with housing and go from there. Stationalize, municipalize hospitals and medical facilities. And thank you for this as well. Initiative amendment saying before companies pack up and leave Ohio, further automate before they go public, or if they already have or merged, they're mandated to make an offer their workers with the help of the government to purchase the company. Establish government agencies that can do for co-ops what Fed small business admin does for small businesses. I make the same argument to Greens. Prioritize CBIs, not running candidates. All right. Thank you so much for that. And I believe I have one more super chat. Thank you, Italian Stallion. Nina defeated herself when she defended the squad doing nothing, then said she would do the same thing. Also, another good point, Italian Stallion. All right. That's it, guys. I'm out of here. Happy Friday. Have a good Saturday tomorrow. If you're in DC, try to go to the march if you can. Again, follow Answer Coalition. It's on their front page, and you'll see all the information about that. Other than that, guys, I'm out of here. I'll be back on Sunday. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.